I'm going to call the next three cases before the commission. Case numbers 2022G005, 2022G006, and 2022G007. Call them all together for argument's sake, not necessarily for decision. We can decide them separately, but the essential arguments are the same. Mr. Hicks has brought a complaint against three respective funds controlled by the Ohio Republican Party that filed campaign finance reports late. And so that's an essential case before the commission. Responses have been submitted by all three of the different funds. And so the commission has those responses. Counsel for the parties is here present physically in the commission. They are identified in Mr. Hughes's computer. And so I'll just remind you, Mr. Hicks, that you've already been sworn. And so you can go ahead and make a statement if, because I believe the commission would like to hear from you further. Yeah, okay.
Okay, can you hear me now? Like I got muted somehow. And so in these three cases, I don't think there's any dispute that the reports were not filed on time. I think that my position is there should either be a significant or the full statutory fine for that, or there should be a full hearing to better understand the actual circumstances of why these reports were not filed on time. The affidavit in response was filed by Justin Biz, who's the executive director of the ORP. He's not a party to this, nor is he the firm that was hired to file the reports. So his affidavit is largely hearsay since he wasn't involved directly. Henry Allen was the firm that was actually hired to file these reports, who advertises itself. It's a Dublin firm to quote, our political accounting and compliance is our singular focus. So these reports were due on, they were for 2021 full year. They were due on January 31. They weren't filed till February 18th. There were actually 4 funds that the ORP has. One of them actually filed on time. 3 did not file on time, and those the 3 that the restricted fund, the state candidate fund, and the 11 funds were the ones that did not file on time. I don't know if the commissioners are aware of the backdrop in which this all happened, but there on January 31st, there was an expose that ran on all Sinclair stations in Ohio about financial and accounting irregularities in the Ohio Republican Party. There was an Ohio Republican Party State Central Committee meeting that took place on February 18th, which happens to be the day that, per Mr. Biz affidavit, they discovered that they had not filed these reports. I want to put forth that there was a motive behind not filing them to avoid inspection by the press and by people that were at that State Central Committee meeting. So that's the fundamental to me in all this is that we haven't heard anything from the actual firm involved, which was Henry Allen. In fact, it wasn't even disclosed within the affidavit of what the firm was that supposedly did not file the reports on time. The explanation is basically that we lost the password, which seems crazy to me that you hired a firm that's supposedly experts in campaign finance reporting, and they didn't file your reports because they lost the password. And so bottom line to this, to me, is that this kind of behavior and what appears to me as funds that routinely for decades, I go back as far as you can go on the Secretary of State site, always filed on time, suddenly don't file on time in this 1 year where there happens to be a TV expose on irregularities in the financial reporting of the Ohio Republican Party. And then they happen to claim in their affidavit on the day immediately after the State Central Committee meeting, they discovered they hadn't filed the reports. And now, it's like, well, we shouldn't get any fine. There shouldn't be any, the position in the affidavit and the lawyer response was that there shouldn't be any fine at all. I know the director has recommended to you that there be a $50 fine. I think that these things are important. And I think that, frankly, either there should be a full statutory fine, which for across all 3 of these would be $6,700. That would be the legal maximum fine that could be given for all the days late for all three funds together would be $6,700. $2,200 for the restricted fund, $2,400 for the state candidate fund, and $2,100 for the 11 funds, $6,700 total. To make clear that this kind of behavior on a political party, the largest political party in our state that routinely filed these reports correctly year after year, is not acceptable. And it's not an excuse that we lost the password to do that. And there's also a context of an expose on Sinclair TV stations across the state that took place at the same time in a meeting where there was a benefit to this financial information not being disclosed in a timely manner consistent with campaign finance laws. So that's my position, is either it should be a full statutory fine or there should be a hearing so we can better understand and get information from the firm, Henry Allen, that wasn't even disclosed by the ORP, that was actually the firm that was contracted specifically to get these reports filed. Thank you.
Okay, if there are no, well, we could wait for questions until later. Okay, let me see. I guess I can I unmute them?
You cannot.
I cannot. They need to, or, okay. Okay, all right. Council is here for the ORP, and so if you would introduce yourself and make whatever comments you wish to make as it relates to the respective cases.
Thank you. My name is Anne Marie Spare, and I'm here with Rachel Maines as well on behalf of the Ohio Republican Party and Dave Johnson. I'm
going to stop you there for a second. Is everybody able to hear them okay? Okay, fine, proceed.
Certainly, as Mr. Hicks already indicated, there's no dispute here that these filings did not occur on time. We provided an affidavit to the commission to provide context as to what happened. We could have not said anything at all and just indicated that they were not timely filed. But we provided that information so that the commission would be aware of this mistake. And again, as Mr. Hicks has said, this is the first time that this has ever happened with the ORP that anybody here is aware of, including Mr. Richter, who has been here for quite some time. So this was an aberration, a mistake. It was rectified, and we understand that the commission is able to impose whatever penalty is allowable under the statute. But we provided the context in an effort to show that the full penalty might not be warranted under the circumstances because this was a first-time offense. With respect to the expose, I can say that that had absolutely nothing to do with this mistake that was made. As pointed out in the affidavit, there was transition that had occurred with the firm. And that is the explanation given by Mr. Biss, who is the boots on the ground at the Ohio Republican Party, who's in charge of these funds. And that's what happened, and that's why he provided the affidavit, because he has knowledge. I am happy to answer any other questions, but we don't, we're prepared here today for whatever the commission decides to do.
Mr. Hicks, any short response here?
No, I just my just very short response, because I failed to mention it, but I appreciate she mentioned it, is Dave Johnson is actually the statutory treasurer for these funds, and so I questioned the response from Mr. Biz when both the statutory treasurer and the firm that did the work, neither of them responded. But again, I'll just come back to the my position is that this should have been this should either be a full and meaningful statutory fine to make clear that this should never happen again, or there should be a full hearing so that we can hear from Henry Allen or from somebody that actually was involved with this process, of which Mr. Biz was not.
Okay, thank you. Do any commissioners have any questions for the litigants?
Mr. Chairman, I have a question, or perhaps two. So, to the respondents, in the affidavit, why weren't the, particularly the new firm and that new firm's level of expertise listed in the affidavit?
Your question is why was
Yeah,
the
why,
name of
why,
the
why,
firm-
you mentioned that firms were changed, but you didn't provide why, why the reason for the change, who the firms were, who you were changing to, just that there was a change.
Quite frankly, we didn't feel that that was relevant. That we admitted that there was a mistake that was made and was providing context as to what happened.
Gotcha. So, I mean, whether there's a decision for what level of fine, for a firm that does this for a living, it seems to me that not having the appropriate information to do the filing would have come to light earlier in, really prior to. I mean, this seems, if the reason it's relevant from my perspective is that this is a firm, as Mr. Hicks says, that specializes in this. I mean, this feels like a pretty obvious miss that should have been, brought to light earlier than after the reporting period.
Is that a question? I mean,
It is. I mean, I'd be interested in your response to that.
It wasn't brought to light sooner. That's all I can tell you.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you.
Any further questions?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Kreitz, I have a question of Respondents' Counsel, please. It was raised by Mr. Hicks in his argument that there apparently are 4 funds that are involved. One of them was filed on time and these 3 were late. Is there some sort of explanation as to why the one was filed on time, but the other 3 were late?
Commissioner Kreitz, this is Rachel Maines. I will answer that question for you. So the state account was filed on time because the firm had the login information. As we described, there was a transition in the firms in July of 2021. And there was a former ORP employee, and I say former because at the time he was with ORP, but he has since transitioned to another position. He was in charge of transitioning the firms, and he only provided one login.
Am I permitted to make a comment?
That's up to the chair.
No. At this time, we are, the questions were directed at the Respondents' Counsel. Right now, we're at the point where commissioners are asking questions.
Hello?
Do the commissioners have any further questions?
I have a question of Mr. Richter, Mr. Chair.
Please proceed.
Mr. Richter, this is a first-time violation. What has been the general policy of the Ohio Elections Commission with respect to first-time violations that are paid within a fairly reasonable length of time? And secondly, what consideration, if any, is given to the fact that, as has been raised by Mr. Knight and also by Mr. Hicks, that this is an entity, the Ohio Republican Party, that does this for a living, so to speak? How does that factor into our decision, if at all?
Well, I guess I'll speak to the more or less the first time violation situation, which is the primary basis for the recommendation that I'm making. Each fund is treated separately because they each are responsible for filing their own reports. And so the recommendation that I'm making in terms of a violation and imposition of a $50 fine in each respective case is because each was a first time party before the commission. We've kind of addressed over the last few months the general change that in policy that the commission has made in terms of being, I guess I'd say imposing more fines depending on the circumstances. And so whereas, 2, 3, 10, 20 years ago, this would have been a violation but good cause. Now, because the reports were filed, but they were filed beyond about a week or so from the due date, I'm recommending the imposition of a fine, and the $50 fine is consistent with other fines for first-time persons before the commission. As it relates to experience of persons, again, I would look to how many times have they been before the commission, and look to be consistent in approach for the same reason. Even experienced firms have problems sometimes where reports are not timely filed. And so I look to each individual circumstance, I look to each individual case, and try and factor that into the decisions that I make in terms of my recommendations. And so certainly it's a factor, but even experienced firms have those times when reports are not timely filed. I've tried to factor that into my decision here and in my recommendations, but certainly whatever fine, I certainly believe a fine is appropriate based on how long it took to get these filings submitted. But the nature of the fine is my recommendation. The commission can do whatever it believes is appropriate based on what it has heard, what has been presented to it in terms of the complaint and the response. I'll be glad to answer any of the questions the commission may have.
Mr. Richter, this is Commissioner Kreitz again. I just want to follow back up on that. One of the issues raised by Mr. Hicks, well, not issues, recommendation is that the full statutory fine amount be imposed for each of the funds. In your 25, 30 years, however long you've been here with the commission, have we ever had situations where we've imposed a maximum? And if so, are the facts similar to the facts that we have here in this case?
We do impose maximum fines, but it is generally in circumstances where parties have been before the commission 4, 5, 6 different times, not for someone, some group, some candidate, in this case, the party that is before the commission ostensibly for the first time.
Thank you, sir.
Any other questions here? Any other comments?
I have a quick question for council. When was it discovered that you didn't have the logins for filing?
I believe that's in the affidavit.
Okay.
It was around February 18th.
I'm sorry?
Around February 18th.
That's when they said that they were filed, but when did you discover you didn't have the login? So did you not try to file them before February 18th?
So in Mr. Biss's affidavit, he states that they discovered they were not filed on February 18th. The reports were then filed afterwards. His affidavit discusses how each fund was then filed about 3 to 4 days afterwards. I believe the exact dates are February 21st, February 22nd, and February 24th.
Yeah, but my question that I asked was, when did you realize you didn't have the logins? If they're due January 31st.
I cannot answer that question. I don't have knowledge of that.
Okay, thank you.
Henry, do you have anything to add?
No, I just know it's in the affidavit. I mean, they weren't aware that they had not been filed until February 18th, and I think that's when they found out why they weren't filed.
Thank you.
Any additional questions? Mr. Hicks, any final comments?
I appreciate that opportunity. The one thing I just want to point out is, again, along the way there, this firm, 1 of 4 of them, they had the password and they filed. 3 of 4, no password, no filing. It's completely implausible that they filed one and had the password and never bothered to alert anybody that they couldn't file the other ones because somebody lost the password. That makes no sense. And then I'll put it in the context of there was, because of the stuff that was happening on TV relating to the party, I think there was an incentive to delay the filing of these to put them after certain things appeared on TV and after an important meeting. But I'm going to go back to just the simple thing. By their own testimony, it just makes no sense that a professional firm to file reports would go ahead and file one, but not bother to alert anybody that they didn't have the login information for the 3 other of the 4. But thank you for giving me the chance to make a final comment.
All right. All right, is there, hearing no comments or additional questions, is there a motion? I'm sorry, we'll handle these
Yeah.
one.
Please, yep.
Yes.
No, I was
sorry
going to
about
say, yeah, I guess what I would say to the commission members, is there a motion on case number 2022 G005?
I move that we follow the recommendation of the executive director.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion that's been duly seconded. Is there any further discussion on this motion? If not, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Raise the
Or raise your hand. Opposed, like sign?
pros.
Opposed.
Mr. Knight is opposed.
Okay,
006.
all right, the motion carries. All right,
006.
let's call the next one. All right,
Is there a motion concerning case number 2022 G006?
I move that we follow the recommendation of the executive director.
I'll second the motion.
That was Mr. Lyle.
okay, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Or raising your hand?
All opposed, same sign.
Opposed.
Thank you.
All right, motion passes by a vote of 6-1.
Correct.
All right. And the final matter is case number 2022 G007. Is there a motion on that?
I move that we follow the recommendation of the executive director.
Is there a second?
Second.
That was Ms. Kaufman.
Okay. There's been a motion that's been duly seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye and raising your hand, please.
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign.
Opposed.
6-1.
All right, motion
Mr. Knight.
motion passes 6-1. Respondents council, do you have any questions regarding?
No, thank you, Chairman.
Thank you.